Okay. We'll call the meeting to order. Mr. Clerk.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The first item is the minutes of this committee's meeting held Monday, May 10th, and recommendations to approve those minutes.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Thank you. The next item is crosstown bicycle route. The staff recommendations is that Council approve in principle a proposed crosstown bicycle route for implementation in 2010. We have brief introductory comments from Mr. Bill Suzak, followed by a presentation by Mr. Paul Lee.
Mr. Suzak, please.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. That's really all I was going to say. We have a brief staff presentation on where and what this crosstown bike route concept looks like. This grew out of a request to staff to see what we can do to put together this idea. And over the past few weeks, our staff has put their heads together, and we have a concept to show you. And if committee and council ultimately likes it, we can proceed to signing stages fairly quickly. Paul, please and thanks.
Mr. Lee, welcome.
Mr. Chair and members of committee, the purpose of my presentation today really is to walk you through this crosstown bike route that staff had worked in the last couple of months to put together. And you will see that the routing really is to exploit or use existing bike routes, things that we've already improved, and also on bike routes that we intend to make into bike routes, and also routing the route through a residential area, a low volume traffic streets, to allow negotiating some steep grades in the neighborhood. So what we have in front of you is the entire route in black and white, going from the intersection of Coast Meridian Road and David Avenue, which is up in the northeast Coquitlam area. And this route will take cyclists all the way through town until they reach the low-heat town center SkyTrain station. What I want to impress upon you is that about 10 kilometers of this bike route, we are using existing routings. For example, David Avenue, which has already been improved with a very generous multi-use pathway. Parts of Guilford, certainly on Como Lake Avenue next to Mundy Park, and then along Foster Avenue, down Whiting Way, and so on. The next component of this crosstown bike route is what we call the future routes from already approved by council in the strategic transportation plan, and that accounts for about 3.5 kilometers of these routes, and that's Pine Tree Way, Johnson Street between Guilford and past Barnett, and actually becomes Mariner Way, parts of Wilmont Street, and parts of Austin Avenue. And the last component is the so-called component through the Ranch Park area, as shown in the inset in blue. That is the area that we're encountering very steep terrain, and we have to use all our design and guiles to overcome that steep grade to allow cyclists to negotiate those grades to reach Como Lake Avenue. So what I intend to do next is to show you some pictorial examples along the route where we intend to take cyclists. The first one is on David Avenue. As we noted, you see the generous bike route, the 2-meter wide bike routes on both sides of David Avenue, allowing cyclists to use that bike route in both directions. The next one is on Pine Tree Way. This shot is taken near Douglas College. And you'll see in the curb lane, we have fairly generous curb lanes that would allow signage to be posted to tell cyclists that they're on the crosstown route. This is on Guilford. Again, Guilford is already an established bike route. We have very good bike facilities and laning facilities on that roadway, and we intend to use that facility for this crosstown bike route. Then we have Johnson's. We're now heading south on Johnson Street towards Barnett and climbing the overpass. We intend to use signage mostly to direct the cyclists on the curb lane to get on this crosstown route. We're now southbound on Mariner Way. FS means far side of Barnett. There's a bit of traffic engineering lingo. So we're now heading actually up on the Mariner overpass heading towards Dewey Trunk Road. We are now at Ranch Park. So I need to explain perhaps a little bit how we get from Mariner Way up to Como Lake Avenue, if you can follow me. First,
You have one also in Chilco.
yes, well, we have a route on Chilco,
That's not the crosstown.
Mr. Chair, but the grade on it is relatively steep. It's meant for experienced cyclists. This crosstown route really is for a nice, lazy Sunday ride with families, with inexperienced cyclists. So we want to make this route as friendly as we can.
Like if you were on a bike.
We'll save questions till the end of the presentation.
So from Mariner Way, if you can envision that we turn onto make a left turn at Dewey Trunk. From Dewey Trunk, we turn onto Ranch Park Way. And then from Ranch Park, we go to Norman. From Norman, we turn onto Saddle. Are you still with me? On Saddle, we turn into Daybreak. From Daybreak, we turn onto Spurway in a short distance. And then we're onto Como Lake, right next to Mundy Park on a very generous part of the bikeway.
Daybreak to Armada.
Yeah. This is Daybreak. This shows Armada, where we've done some where we've done improvement lately on Armada. Then we're on to Spurway, wide street that's capable of accommodating cyclists. From Spurway now, we're looking west, and you can see the tree area is Mundy Park, and we are now heading west on Como Lake. This is a shot at Como Lake near Mundy Park. You see the very generous pathway on the edge of the park on Como Lake. Then we turn south on Wilmont, and we go all the way south until we hit Foster Avenue. Foster is already an established bike route with signage and so on. And then this is Foster. This is not quite at Wilmont. This is further west at this point. And then we get on Westview, Whiting Way, before we turn into Austin Avenue to reach the SkyTrain station. So this concludes my presentation, and I'm be happy to take questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Lee. Councillor Robbins.
Of course. Well, first of all, I want to thank you so much for putting this together. I've ridden it, and it's actually quite a lovely tootle along, or a commute along. Some people like to tootle. Well, two questions. One that I just noticed, and I don't know what the plan is, where we have designated bike paths or designated lanes, do we do any extra cleaning, any extra road cleaning? I'm curious, only because as a cyclist, debris on roads like at David and at Foster, it can be problematic, and I just want to know if that's something that we have accounted for.
We work very closely with Public Works, and Public Works is fully aware of all the bike routes that we have, and I'm sure that is something that we can...
Just a question. The other thing that I noticed when we do this, should council approve this, it will be, the idea is to get started on it this summer.
Yes.
And there will be an education component in terms of promoting it, letting people know that that we actually are a cycling community, that there are places in Coquitlam that you could cycle in relative safety.
Yes.
And I noticed in our budget, it's going to cost $40,000 is what we're estimating. And I noticed in the report that there's a total of 93 unspent works for the 2007 bike route program, which means that there's 53,000 left. And I'm just wanting to know if there's any thoughts to what might be next. Not meaning to.
Through the chair, in fact, you brought up a very good point. Not only we have to designate the route, but we need to promote it. And this is how we promote sustainable development and active transportation in Coquitlam. The first thing we'll do is to make sure that this route is known for the Bike to Work Week, sponsored by the Vancouver Area Cycling Coalition, and that's in the first week of June. So we will certainly work together with the organizer of that event to make sure that there's press coverage and so on. so that we demonstrate to the public that the city is serious about providing cycling routes. As far as budget, we can certainly look into that and make sure that we have a continuous, sustainable effort to promote cycling in Coquitlam.
That's great. Okay, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. Councillor Sikora.
Thank you, Chair. Here's one right here. I support the bicycle routes when they're well planned and well looked. Where we're doing some new developments, we're making room for these kind of things. But I noticed like this one here, it's a conflict with the cars, and I don't like it. When there's a conflict with the cars, because there could be very easy accidents occur. Okay. Also, the one on Foster Street, if you go back a few slides to Foster.
Yeah, that's Foster.
Yeah, you have a bicycle route, but there's no space there there's no line for the bicycles to go in. So it's part of that. That area was the one that had a big uprising with the residents on both sides, that we were taking their parking away in front of the houses they had for many, many years. So that was a problem. Now, going on the other side where the car is, or the truck on Foster Street, going past the Vancouver Golf Club, there's no way you can get bicycle route through there because it's way too narrow. You'd have to take some of the Vancouver Golf Course property. Those are the things that, to me, is conflicting. I think that the other areas, I support bicycle routes. I think if people want to get on their bicycle, go from one end of Coquitlam to the other, they should be able to. But where there's conflicts, I've got some difficulty with it. And that thing, just a matter of a joke, is that you said we'll walk you through this. You're going to ride us through this. But, so those are my comments. I think it's a great idea. I think it's a great thing. But I think, I was somewhere yesterday. I was driving around, and not in Coquitlam, but other municipalities. And there was quite a few bicycles on the road, and you could see that they're almost going into the ditch to get out of the way for cars. So those are some of the things that doesn't make a very good bicycle route for people. I'm not saying that they're in Coquitlam, but other cities that I've seen happening. But this is a good improvement. I'm glad that you're planning for the northeast Coquitlam for those things. I think it's great.
I think it's a good plan, Mr. Lee. I think for the cost involved, it's very minimal to improve in those linkages. It's not perfect by any means. I don't think we're saying it's perfectly. But as we have this linkage and people get to use it, and as years come along, we will be looking at making better improvements when we do new road work, correct? Okay. And so I think for the signage in this, to get the cyclist to know a route that's on lower volume areas for safety, and that's where you have that shared use of the car and the vehicle because it's on lower volume routes, so there won't be that conflict as you would on higher volume routes. So I'm very supportive of this. I think it's a very good plan, a good step in the right direction. I'm looking forward to Youth Week, or not the Youth, but the Cycling Week, and the promotion of it with the cyclists in the Vancouver Area Cycling Coalition. And I think Councillor Robinson has one last comment.
Yeah, I just want to respond to Councillor Sikora's questions. And I would invite him to join me on a cycling route right across, because the truth is we don't have enough designated bike lanes across the city. So as a cyclist, for me to go anywhere, I have to go where the cars are. There is no choice. So I think this is a fabulous start. At least by signing it, we let drivers know in their big vehicles to just watch out for the cyclists, especially the little ones, that we're going to be on the road and that you need to slow down and you need to make room and you need to be respectful. So this is a good start.
Good beginning.
It's a good start.
Yeah.
And Councillor Sikora, anytime you want to join me for a ride, you let me know. Thank you.
I'm in favor of the motion, Chair.
Thank you. So it's
Second.
been moved.
And I'll second.
Seconded? Yep. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The next item concerns the Strategic Transportation Plan update. It's a second progress report. We have an introduction by Mr. Paul Lee, who's also going to introduce Mr. John Steiner from Urban Systems Limited. The staff recommendation is that the committee receive the report for information.
Welcome back, Mr. Lee.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of committee. My function this afternoon is to introduce Mr. Steiner, who's the main consultant who is helping the city to put together this strategic plan update. Staff have been working since October of last year updating this plan, and the process involves an extensive public consultation process involving businesses, residents associations, and other stakeholders. The completed date of this STP update is expected by March 2011. The last time that staff approached the committee on an update of this plan was back in April 12th, where staff recommended the appointment of the Public Advisory Group. Since then, we have two major public consultation process. One is to hold the first Public Advisory Group meeting on April 21st, really to look over the existing conditions and to discuss the first discussion paper on discovering some of the existing conditions and so on. The second public consultation event happened about a week and a half ago on May 5th, where we held a very successful public visioning workshop. And during the workshop, the participants were asked what are at stake in terms of the community's views when it comes to transportation, and to identify some major emerging themes that would guide the STP update process. So today, Mr. Steiner will give you a more detailed update on the STP, and also will give you some details on some of the things that we found out from this public visioning workshop.
Thank you.
Mr. Steiner?
Mr. Steiner, welcome.
Members of the committee. So I'll just pick up where Mr. Lee left off in terms of I'll give you an update on the process that we've gone through thus far in the transportation plan, a little bit of the context and what you can expect through the process. I realize everybody's already familiar with that, and give you a glimpse of some of the issues and challenges that we've heard through the public consultation efforts, as well as through the background study work that we've done, and some of the input that we've received thus far, and then open it up for any comments and discussion. Mr. Lee referred to a number of initiatives that have already occurred through the process. I won't go through those again, related to open houses, public advisory committee meetings, a public workshop, or stakeholder workshop that occurred about a week and a half ago, was attended by 50 or so people from the community, in addition to various agencies that did join in the discussion. But where we started out the discussion in the process, and usually at this stage in the process, we want to understand what's at stake for the community in terms of the transportation system, and look at beyond just the transportation system, but all aspects of the community, and start the discussion there so everybody has a chance to step back and talk about what your aspirations are for your community as it relates to transportation. One of those areas that we've talked about in terms of the process is the rapid growth that's anticipated and forecast for the city of Coquitlam as one of the high-growth communities of the Lower Mainland, and through much of the previous work that we have been involved in with the city, but recognize the pressure that puts on the community over the next 20, 25 years to grow in population by another 100,000 people. In addition to that, we wanted to put on the table, too, to recognize what are the increasing pressures that local governments face in all aspects, not just transportation. But at the end of the day, look how all of these areas and challenges that the city faces relate back to the foundation of transportation and land use, and what the role of the transportation system looking ahead might be. So we took people through a bit of a journey around that, those increasing pressures. We also talked about climate change and the current work that you're doing around the climate strategy for the city, and looking at the significance of what the greenhouse gases produced by transportation are, and what the possibilities are for the future, and recognize that transportation, the plan, plays a role in achieving your goals as it relates to reducing greenhouse gases, which account for about 50%, slightly more than 50% of the greenhouse gases. And we also wanted to recognize other initiatives that are going on both within the city, regionally as well as provincially, that also go into influencing the plan and influencing the go-forward strategy. But what we wanted to put out for people is a recognition that we generally respond to what we hear from the community in these transportation initiatives in terms of where what we refer to as the pendulum sits with communities. And every community is evolving, but I guess the senses are really getting an early sense of how significant are the stakes and how significant is this opportunity for the city looking ahead. And the way we've characterized it in the past is looking at various transportation strategies that we've been involved in the province and looking at varying degrees of urban and suburban environments and certainly the plans that follow those environments. And certainly we've portrayed this as being the city at a crossroads between what you aspire to be and the challenges you face going ahead and the important change that you can make in looking at this plan as an opportunity to go forward. And there's many other plans that have looked at and we've characterized them as being very progressive for the areas. In other words, they're established communities, urbanized environments, significant challenges related to accommodating various modes of transportation. But the opportunity is also there to gauge that with your residents, and we've been doing that through this process thus far, and I'll talk a little bit about that. The process that you've already seen this, a four-phase process, of which there's a number of reports that will develop through that process, which had started from what Paul referred to earlier, the transportation conditions and challenges. We've started to talk about those. We're at the stage right now of developing a vision, goals, and opportunities. And we'll use the stakeholder input that we've heard thus far to help us develop that. We'll also use various policies of the city, corporate strategy, EuroCP, to help, again, the transportation system is not the end, it's a means to another end, and look for what that other end looks like. We'll take you through this rest of the process, and it'll take us through to February 2011. The process, as you're well aware, also includes a whole bunch of stakeholder engagement workshops from staff, surveys, public advisory group that's made up of various interests in the community, open houses, and last but not least, a number of stakeholder workshops and council workshops. So throughout the process, we'll have a number of touchstone points where we'll be able to go through what we've learned so far. And before we do move forward is getting advice and ideas on where we go in the process. So at each stage of the process, we're looking for guidance, suggestions, and ideas going forward. We have produced a draft report on issues and challenges, current conditions, and looking ahead, and some context for planning of the city's transportation system. A whole series of issues were identified related to walking, cycling, transit, roads, goods, and travel demand management initiatives. And some of these could be easily turned into opportunities for the city in looking ahead. What we wanted to do, just gauging through this process early on, is get a sense of what are those issues today and what are they over the next 25 years that you see as a community. Through the last workshop and the previous Public Advisory Committee meeting before that, we've been asking these questions, these foundational questions that will help us shape the goals, visions, and objectives the city sees for the transportation system in terms of what's at stake for the community, what can be achieved, and what are the transportation opportunities, and what are the relative priorities. Some of the transportation opportunities we're looking for and getting ideas around are, what do you see as possible signature pieces, perhaps for the city looking ahead, as it relates to your transportation system, so that people identify that as part of your community. As a key part of it is the transportation system, and what are some of the ideas and the possibilities, and then the relative priorities. Engaging people's ideas about what some of those relative priorities are, which ultimately will help influence not only the plan, but also perhaps where you may invest in future over the next 10, 20 years in terms of the various modes as a community. What we've heard thus far in some of the common themes, I'll just report those out fairly quickly, what's at stake for the city. People referred to livability, quality of life, managing population growth, social sustainability, economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, resiliency, and credibility. So people are certainly looking beyond the transportation system in terms of what they think is at stake within this strategy. What do you want the plan to achieve? Again, people were looking beyond the transportation system in terms of what they were hoping the transportation plan will achieve and we'll be looking at all of those foundation pieces that the transportation plan can contribute. In terms of some of those signature opportunities, there were a number of ideas that came forward. This was, again, just for the sake of generating some ideas and possibilities, thinking through the process. People looking at walking and cycling facilities, the reference earlier to your previous discussion, possibilities for more multi-use paths, dealing with safety on bike routes and so forth, very topical for today. But looking at all modes and the possibilities for the future. Around the road network is really starting to integrate some of these other facilities even better than what exists today. So we've seen a number of themes and some of the opportunities that we may bring out or will bring out through this process. The final area that we saw are what are your priorities? Again, a way of gauging people's sense of priorities for moving ahead, of what the city should be considering in the transportation plan. And this just gives you a relative sense of priorities through the workshop. There was a number of discussion groups that were held. And the relative priorities around transit, walking and pedestrians, travel demand management and cycling were amongst the highest priorities that we heard from that group of 50 people in terms of going ahead, which is very telling when you look at this in terms of the transportation strategy and perhaps some of the foundation pieces that we may be looking for moving forward. So that was my overview of the process thus far, some of the themes we've heard, and some of the questions that we've been asking through the process in order to set in place some of the vision, goals, and objectives for the plan.
Thank you very much, John. I think right now you're at that beginning 30,000-foot stage, gathering information. It's a good report so far. I guess some of my comments are in regards to, as we develop this transportation plan and look to the future again, because the last one was about 10 years ago that we did the present one.
That's correct.
You know, the effect of outside agencies, provincial government, TransLink, different groups on our transportation plan as it moves forward in the future, what changes that they may bring to our, and having that flexibility within our plan to deal with that. You know, I think we have from the 2010 plan did envision the King Edward overpass. I don't think it envisioned the Pitt River Bridge this soon, and how those are changing our travel patterns, and how our travel patterns may again change due to the commitments or lack of commitments by outside agencies on our transportation plan moving the future, and they're critical to us achieving our GHG goals in the future. The one thing in here is a comment just to engaging in traffic calming. I hope we can do it better than what we did our one major time around, and get a better sense of different options on traffic calming, different design features. On the report, when we get into, and I guess just some quick comments on the bus summary headways for various service types. On the 177 service, you have AM peak 15 minutes, but that's only half the route going to Planet Ice and back, you know, not to Coquitlam Center. So I think that needs to be clarified, because it gives people thinking that that bus runs to Coquitlam Center from Braid 15. No, it's half hour, but from Planet Ice to Braid is 15 minutes. So it's half the route. And then on the regional bus, we got a 110, a 112, a 136. Well, those are buses that operate in Burnaby, not in Coquitlam. So as to why they're in there, another. And I guess as we push forward, we talk about service levels, and while the 15-minute service is good to attract ridership and improve in 20-minute service, our midday and evening service, as noted in your report, service level of 30 minutes or more during off-peak periods are unattractive and highlight some of those gaps that we need to identify more as we move forward with TransLink and service to get more people. Because if we're going to achieve what the people are saying there, 'cause it's one thing when people say we want transit and walkability, the flip side of that is they need those gaps fixed, and they need those accessibility gaps of those walking paths fixed. And so those are the key elements, is looking into those gaps and finding how, because we don't achieve the fix in those gaps, we're not going to respond to those people's desires and wants in those first two columns where they said they wanted that improvement. So those are my comments right now. Any other speakers to this? Oh, Councillor Robinson.
Thank you, Councillor Asmundson. I'm just going to toss out a little bit of a pebble. because I'd like the question, what's at stake? And if I recall, it was that there was sort of livability, and certainly reading the report, people are really concerned about growth, and that we're already lagging behind in terms of transportation. We're way behind. And I know that Mayor Tassolini and their council has made a statement that until Evergreen Line is committed, completely committed, shovel in the ground, that they're doing a moratorium on growth. And I'm wondering if that is the kind of conversation that we might need to have as well, because frankly, I'm quite concerned, because the message that I got in reading this is that we really absolutely have to have decent transit, and it was the number one priority, overshadowing everything else. And so I become very concerned that we're going to absorb all these people and always be behind the 8 ball in terms of transportation. And I just want to invite my committee members and the rest of council that maybe that's a discussion that we ought to have. I'm curious about what's the timing on the, I saw the thing on the timing of the final report. That's not till next year. But I wanted to know, would we be able to, is there another report that we'll be getting after this and before we make budget decisions? We make budget decisions, I guess, in the fall.
Fall?
Through the chair, you're correct. The final decision and adoption of the new plan won't be spring next year.
Right.
But as you can see, we're holding public consultation. We just had a public workshop where the public is already giving us priorities and so on to guide us. And with the direction of the committee, we can certainly take some of that information and mold it into a way that we can guide us into the current budgeting process, which will happen this summer. That will perhaps give us some idea about the short-term requirements. Obviously, we won't know until early next year, in 2011, the entire implication of the plan, the budgeting, the financial aspect of the plan. But on shorter terms, we will certainly seek direction from the committee to guide us.
I think what Councilor Robbins also is probably is there going to be, like, this is a receipt for information report. Will we be having some more updates as we go along? Not major reports, just updates on.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And the rationale for that is I went through all of our policies, in particular, our policies that have to do with our neighborhood and area plans. And in every single area plan, I was actually thrilled to see it, it talked about walking and cycling easier. Every single one identified that. And I want to make sure that when we go through our budgeting process, that we're in line with our policies and our budget decisions, that it influences our budget decisions. So I'm just wanting to make sure that there's some sort of documentation of wherever we're at that will certainly help me, and I hope the rest of council, to make some decisions that support our policy directions, and that we're in sync with our vision as well as our budget decisions. I think Mr. Susak has a comment.
Mr. Susak.
Sure. Mr. Chair, this document will this document will serve as a guide from a policy perspective, likely for the next 8 to 10 years. So there will be multiple opportunities to mold and shape council's view of where resources should be placed. Given that it does have long term, though we will endeavor to have a synopsis paper prepared as part of this cycle's budget. It will obviously not be a formally adopted plan, but we can certainly let council know what the status is.
That would be really helpful. I just have a couple comments about the report itself, if I might, Chair.
You've got the floor.
Thank you. I just want to make a distinction. On page 25 of the discussion paper number 1, it talks about that we have 15 kilometers of bicycle routes. And I just want to make a distinction between bicycle lanes and bicycle routes. Because we've just designated at 17 kilometers of bicycle route, and then there's other, so just in terms of language, I think we have far more bicycle routes than we have bicycle lanes. I have a couple of other editorial comments that I'll share with you later, but I just have a question about pedestrian facilities. What does that mean?
It largely refers to your sidewalk facilities as well as your crossing facilities for pedestrians and other amenities in the public right-of-way for pedestrians.
Okay, I was thinking, so do they mean like benches? I wasn't exactly sure. And then the last comment I want to make just has to do with our existing and planned bicycle network. Right now, it's presented in isolation of all the other communities that surround us. And in the report, it talked about connectivity with others. And I'm just wanting to know in future if we could get a sense of the connectivity. So it's great to see what Coquitlam's doing, but I'd like to see it relative to what Port Coquitlam has, Port Moody has, and New West has, just where we connect so that we can make sure that as we go forward making perhaps some budget decisions, we can see the bigger picture.
Absolutely.
That would be helpful.
The plan was probably developed before some of the other communities actually had plans, but now they do, and we certainly show the connections.
Great.
And I think that would roll in, Mr. Lee, into we are trying to arrange a meeting from the chair of this committee to the chairs of the other two cities on transportation transit issues, and that'll be another item that we will highlight and work with those cities, because we have to work with them on roads, transit, and cycling.
Excellent.
Issues.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reid.
My question has to do with, this is our long-term plan, but right now, I would say in this next year, there's so much that's sort of in flux with the new overpasses, with the Port Mann, with perhaps the North Fraser sometime in my lifetime coming on board, and of course the ever distant Evergreen line. Are you going to complete this plan prior to all of those things being written in stone?
Yeah, the process certainly will. And just maybe to point of clarification too, the last plan you did 10 years ago that started about 12 years ago, it recognized the intentions and the commitments at the time, which were to widen the Port Mann Bridge and the Highway 1 corridor, widen the Pitt River crossing. The Coast Meridian overpass was a twinkle in someone's eye at the time. I don't think it was actually located there. And the King Edward overpass and the Brunette Triangle area, those were all part of the previous process. And so another way to look at that might be those are staring you in the face right now in terms of their completion, and that really the next stage of question is what next? And I think that's what we're intending here. So a lot of that was envisioned, or at least planned through that process previously.
My concerns is so much of what happens in our city is dependent upon, say, for New Westminster, for part of the, United Boulevard, Lougheed, Brunette interchanges, all of that, and for Port Coquitlam, they're talking about it would be nice to have SkyTrain when it gets here, if it gets here, stop at Lincoln and somehow scoot across to Poco. And I mean, there's all those things that still may come to fruition. And I just wanted to ask the question.
Okay. Did I answer it to your satisfaction?
Well, you did. And I guess when you're doing a long-term strategic plan like this, you take note of all those things that I have just mentioned. And then so we could have a quick update of how we should perhaps adjust our plan.
Right.
Do you?
Yep.
Paul? You keep.
If I may, through the chair, the updated STP will reinforce the city's position on these key transportation issues. Absolutely. And the updated STP will definitely highlight the importance of these things so we can take it to other levels of government to make sure that they know that our sustainability, our economic development depends on those things. Some of those things are happening. The Cape Horn development, the 10-lane Port Mann Bridge, the King Ed overpass, but there are gaps, as you mentioned, and those things will certainly be reinforced in our strategic transportation plan to show the importance.
My question was more around, we've got our plan going Plan A, and there's certain little sections of our plan that certainly need to have Plan B and C behind them. And so you're prepared to adjust our plan in the next, if we're looking at a 10-year plan, I mean, we're going to have adjustments. So you've got Plan B and C down, have you, somewhere?
Pardon me?
I says, you've got note that this particular spot may not go as Plan A. We may need to have Plan B.
Yeah, and just for the benefit of committee, the last plan had a lot of sensitivity analysis done. That wasn't, that was just some insensitivity to what ifs. What if the Pitt River Bridge wasn't widened? What if the Port Mann Bridge project didn't go forward? All those sensitivities are ones that we do look at in the interest of Coquitlam and really protecting, as Paul said, being clear on where you want to go as a community with other agencies.
Yeah.
So we'll make sure that that's part of it.
Thank you very much, John.
Councillor Sikora.
Yeah, thank you. This transportation plan, you're looking for all of Coquitlam as far as transportation plan is concerned?
Correct.
Or just certain parts?
All of Coquitlam.
All of Coquitlam, okay. Then, what about the Port Mann Bridge when it's a new Port Mann Bridge is built? I understand that there could be some hiccups in different areas of Coquitlam.
That's
Now,
correct.
could you
We
tell me
understand that too.
How have you addressed that? That's just what I asked. They've got Plan B and C.
Through the chair, for clarification, the councillor is asking about what happens if with other development with the Port Mann Bridge? No.
Yeah, in other words, the provincial government was going to do so many things in Coquitlam to do the Port Mann Bridge. Then I understand that there's shortfall of money and it's all not going to be put in there. So I'm saying to myself, okay, have you addressed the hiccups that we're going to have as far as the city's concerned? Because you can do all the engineering you want to studies in the world. If we have a great big problem after the Port Mann Bridge is built, then I want to know ahead of time.
Yes. Through the chair, that analysis has already been partially done, and certainly that analysis and some of the, as John mentioned, some of the sensitivity analysis will be incorporated when we're developing this new plan, and all those things will be taken into consideration.
Yeah, so when are we going to know, this council know when there's any problems?
We are developing scenarios in the fall, and certainly there will be updating, there'll be council workshops, and all those things will be bring up at that point.
And is the consultant aware of what's happening, or is the consultant not aware of what's happening, and he's, I'd hate for him to be floating around with blindfold on when A or B is not exposed to him?
The consultant will be shared with all the information that currently we have at the Brunette interchange, and with respect to North Fraser Perimeter Road and the situation at TransLink and so on. Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much. Paul, John? See no other questions? Thank you very much for your presentation. Do we have a mover?
Receipt?
Yeah.
Second? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Move adjournment?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is the last formal item, so we are...
Second? All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. We're done. Thank you.